He found her unconscious in the frozen forest, a stranger with secrets written in bruises and fear. Maxwell Everley, Duke of Norvale, had sworn never to open his heart again after tragedy stole his first love. But the moment he lifted her into his arms, something shifted inside him. She was running from a past that refused to let her go. He was a man who had forgotten how to feel. What began as rescue became something neither could deny, a love that would challenge everything they believed about second chances. Northern England, 1893. A winter that changed everything. The wind carved through Wycliffe Forest with the cruelty of a blade, stripping branches bare and turning breath to vapor. Maxwell Everley, Duke of Norvale, pulled his coat tighter as his horse navigated the frozen path back to the estate. The afternoon inspection of his tenant farms had taken longer than expected, and darkness crept through the trees like an unwelcome guest. He had made this journey 100 times, perhaps 1,000. Every tree, every turn, held the same indifferent familiarity. The forest did not care that he was a duke. It did not mourn with him. Maxwell preferred it that way. His horse nickered, ears flicking forward. The duke frowned, scanning the twilight ahead. Nothing moved except the wind through skeletal branches. Then he saw it, a splash of dark fabric against the snow, barely visible beneath the ice-covered roots of an ancient oak. He dismounted before conscious thought caught up with instinct. She lay crumpled like a discarded doll, dark hair spread across the frost, one pale hand reaching toward nothing. No cloak, no shoes, the hem of her dress torn and stained with mud and blood. Maxwell dropped to his knees, pressing 2 fingers to the side of her throat. A pulse fluttered there, faint but steady. Relief crashed through him with unexpected force. Her skin burned with fever despite the cold. Bruises mottled her exposed arms, some fresh, others yellowed with age. His jaw tightened as he took in the full picture. This woman had been running from something, or someone. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her, then gathered her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her head lolled against his shoulder, lips parted on a shallow breath. "Who are you?" he wondered. "And what manner of hell did you escape?" The ride to Norvale Hall took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Maxwell held her against his chest, using his body to shield her from the wind. She stirred once, a small sound of pain escaping her throat, and something in his chest constricted. He had not held anyone like this since Anna. The thought arrived unbidden and unwelcome. He pushed it away. When Norvale Hall rose before them, all warm stone and glowing windows, Maxwell did not take her to the servants' entrance as protocol demanded. He rode straight to the main doors and dismounted carefully, the woman still cradled in his arms. The doors flew open before he could call out. Mrs. Fairchild, his housekeeper, stood framed in golden lamplight, her expression shifting from surprise to alarm in an instant. "Mrs. Fairchild, I need hot water, blankets, and Dr. Grant immediately." The housekeeper did not waste time with questions. She turned on her heel, already issuing orders to the footman behind her. "Send William for the doctor. Clara, prepare the blue room. Move quickly." Maxwell carried the woman up the grand staircase, aware of the servants parting before him, their faces carefully blank even as their eyes followed his burden. The blue room sat at the east wing, far enough from his own chambers to be proper, close enough that he could hear if she cried out. Not that propriety had stopped him from bringing a strange woman through his front door like a prize. He laid her on the bed as gently as he could. Mrs. Fairchild appeared with an armload of blankets and a basin of warm water. "Her dress is in tatters, Your Grace. We will need to remove it to assess her injuries properly." Maxwell stepped back. "Of course. I will wait outside." Mrs. Fairchild's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You did the right thing bringing her here." He nodded, but doubt already gnawed at him. Had he? What if she was fleeing the law? What if whoever hurt her came looking? What if she died anyway? And all his intervention amounted to was prolonging her suffering. He paced the hallway, listening to the muffled sounds of activity beyond the door. Footsteps, murmured voices, the clink of porcelain. "Doctor." Philip Grant arrived within the hour, his medical bag in hand and snow dusting his shoulders. The doctor was a friend as much as a physician, one of the few people Maxwell tolerated beyond polite necessity. "Found her in the woods," Maxwell said without preamble. "Unconscious, feverish, signs of violence." Dr. Grant's mouth thinned. "Let me see her." They entered together. The woman lay still beneath layers of blankets, her face flushed with fever. Mrs. Fairchild had cleaned the worst of the dirt away, revealing a delicate bone structure and a purple bruise along her jaw. Dr. Grant conducted his examination with quiet efficiency, his hands gentle as he checked her pulse, her breathing, the visible injuries. Maxwell stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the doctor's face for any sign of hopelessness. Finally, Dr. Grant straightened and gestured Maxwell into the hallway. "She has been badly beaten," he said quietly. "Multiple contusions, some days old, 2 cracked ribs, severe exhaustion and exposure. The fever is my greatest concern at present, but if we can break it in the next day or 2, she should recover." "And her mind?" Dr. Grant hesitated. "We will not know until she wakes. Head injuries are unpredictable at best." Maxwell nodded slowly. "Thank you, Philip." The doctor studied him with the kind of knowing look that came from years of friendship. "You plan to keep her here?" It was not a question. "Until I know she's safe," Maxwell said. "Yes." Dr. Grant sighed. "You are inviting complications, Max. If someone comes looking for her, then they will answer to me." The words came out harder than intended, edged with something Maxwell did not care to examine. Dr. Grant raised his hands in surrender. "Very well, I will return tomorrow to check on her progress. In the meantime, keep her warm and hydrated. If the fever worsens, send for me immediately." After the doctor left, Maxwell returned to the blue room. Mrs. Fairchild sat in a chair beside the bed, a bowl of broth balanced on her lap. "Your Grace, you should rest. I will watch over her tonight." Maxwell shook his head. "I will stay." The housekeeper did not argue. She simply set the bowl aside and moved toward the door. "I will have a tray sent up for you." When he was alone with the stranger, Maxwell pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. In the lamplight, he could see her more clearly. The elegant line of her throat, the surprising strength in her hands despite their slenderness, the way her brow furrowed even in unconsciousness as if troubled by dreams. Something glinted at her neck. Maxwell leaned closer and saw a small cameo pendant on a delicate chain. He lifted it carefully, angling it toward the light. His breath caught. The cameo bore a coat of arms he recognized, the Ashcombe crest. It had been years since he last saw it, but memory did not fail him. The Viscount of Ashcombe had died 5 years ago, leaving behind a widow and children Maxwell had never met. Was this woman connected to that family? A daughter? A ward? He let the pendant fall back against her skin and reached to brush a damp strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered at her temple, feeling the dangerous heat radiating from her. "Who are you?" he whispered again. And beneath the question lay another, more troubling one. "Why do I already feel as if I must protect you, as if I have been waiting to find you all along?" The woman's lips parted on a soft exhale. Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Maxwell settled back in his chair and prepared to wait. Outside, the winter wind howled against the windows, but inside this room, something had shifted. The house that had felt like a mausoleum for 3 years suddenly held its breath, waiting. Whatever came next, Maxwell knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let this woman face it alone. Dawn broke pale and uncertain over Norvale Hall, casting long shadows across the blue room, where Madeline Hale first opened her eyes to a world that felt both foreign and inexplicably safe. The ceiling above her was painted with delicate plasterwork, cream and gold catching the early light. Heavy curtains framed tall windows. The bed beneath her was soft in a way she had forgotten beds could be, and for one confused moment, she wondered if she had died in that frozen forest. Then pain arrived, sharp and insistent along her ribs, and she knew with certainty that she was very much alive. A figure rose from a chair near the window, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched by silver at the temples. He moved toward her with careful steps, as if approaching a wounded animal that might bolt. "You are awake." His voice was deep, measured, holding a warmth that surprised her. "How do you feel?" Madeline tried to speak, but her throat burned dry. He seemed to understand immediately, reaching for a glass of water on the bedside table. He slipped one hand behind her shoulders, supporting her weight as he brought the glass to her lips. Slowly, he murmured, small sips. The water was cool and sweet. She drank carefully, aware of how close he stood, how gentle his touch remained even as strength radiated from him. When she had taken enough, he lowered her back to the pillows with the same care. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely more than a whisper. "What is your name?" The question hung in the air between them. For a heartbeat, Madeline considered lying, but something in his eyes, grey as winter morning, steady and patient, made deception feel impossible. Madeline Hale. She watched his expression shift subtly, recognition flickering there. He knew the name, perhaps he knew what it meant. "I am Maxwell Everley, Duke of Norvale. You are safe here, Miss Hale. No one will harm you under my roof." The formality of his words contrasted with the intimate way he still stood close, his hand resting on the edge of the bed near hers. Madeline felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "I do not understand why you would help me. You do not know me." "I found you unconscious in my forest," he said simply, "barefoot in winter, injured. What else should I have done? Most men would have sent for the constable, or turned away entirely." Maxwell's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I am not most men." Before Madeline could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Mrs. Fairchild entered, carrying a tray laden with tea and toast, her shrewd eyes taking in the scene with practiced neutrality. "Your Grace, Dr. Grant will arrive within the hour." "And Miss Hale, you must be famished." Maxwell stepped back, creating proper distance as the housekeeper set the tray on the bedside table. Madeline watched him retreat to the window, hands clasped behind his back, his profile strong against the morning light. Mrs. Fairchild helped her sit up, adjusting pillows with efficient kindness. When the housekeeper lifted Madeline's arm to settle a shawl around her shoulders, pain lanced through her ribs, and Madeline gasped despite herself. Maxwell turned sharply. "What is it?" Mrs. Fairchild's expression darkened as she gently examined Madeline's arms, now visible in daylight. Bruises covered her skin in various stages of healing, a map of violence written in purple, yellow, and green. "Your Grace," the housekeeper said quietly, "perhaps you should wait outside while I help Miss Hale prepare for the doctor's examination." "No." Maxwell's voice carried an edge now. "I want to understand what happened to her." Madeline met his eyes, seeing anger there, but not directed at her. At whoever had done this, the realization loosened something in her chest. "My half-brother," she said, the words coming easier now. "Edward Hale, Viscount of Ashcombe. After our father died 5 years ago, he became my guardian. He told everyone that my mother's inheritance had been consumed by debts, and it had not." Madeline shook her head. "My mother established a trust before she died. Edward lied to gain control of it. When I discovered the truth, he locked me in my rooms. He had already arranged a marriage for me." "To whom?" "Lord Pierce Crowell. A man whose estates are mortgaged to ruin and whose reputation is somehow worse. Edward sold me to him to settle his own debts." Maxwell's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You ran, I had no choice." Madeline's voice cracked despite her attempt at control. "The wedding was set for 3 days hence. I broke a window and climbed down a trellis in the middle of the night. I ran for hours before I collapsed. I did not even know where I was going." "You were going to safety," Maxwell said, his voice gentler now, "and you found it." Dr. Grant's arrival prevented further conversation. The physician was a kind-faced man with graying hair and steady hands. He examined Madeline thoroughly, while Mrs. Fairchild remained as chaperone, his expression growing grimmer with each injury he catalogued. "2 cracked ribs," he told Maxwell afterward in the hallway, his voice low but not low enough to prevent Madeline from hearing. "Multiple contusions in various stages of healing. This was not a single incident, Your Grace. This was sustained violence over time." "Can she travel?" "Not for several weeks at minimum. The ribs need time to heal, and she is severely weakened by exposure and malnutrition. Moving her now would risk serious complications." Maxwell nodded slowly. "Then she stays." "Your Grace, Doctor," Grant said carefully, "if this Lord Crowell comes looking for her, let him come." Maxwell's tone left no room for argument. "In the meantime, I want the name of your most trusted solicitor. Someone discreet who can investigate a trust fund and potential fraud by a viscount. Dr. Grant studied his friend with concern and something that might have been approval. You are taking a considerable risk. She has already taken a greater one by trusting me with her truth. I will not abandon her to those who hurt her. After the doctor left with promises to return the following day, Maxwell knocked softly before entering Madeline's room. She sat propped against pillows, looking small and fragile in the large bed, yet her eyes held a strength that contradicted her circumstances. I have sent for a solicitor, Maxwell said, sitting in the chair beside her bed. He will investigate your trust and your brother's claims. If there has been fraud, we will expose it. Why? The question came out as barely more than a breath. Why would you do all this for me? Maxwell was silent for a long moment, his gaze holding hers. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of emotion he had not intended to reveal. Because no one should suffer as you have. Because I have the power to help, and to do nothing would make me complicit. And because... He stopped himself, the unfinished sentence hanging between them like a held breath. Because... Madeline prompted softly. Maxwell reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused from riding, gentle in a way that made her throat tighten. Because from the moment I found you in that forest, I have felt responsible for your safety. I cannot explain it rationally, but there it is. Madeline looked down at their joined hands, his large and strong, hers small and marked by injury. She should pull away. Propriety demanded it. But she could not bring herself to break this connection, this first kindness she had known in years. Thank you, she whispered. Maxwell's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch so brief it might have been accidental, yet it sent warmth spiraling through her. He stood abruptly as if realizing the impropriety, but his hand lingered in hers for 1 second longer than necessary. Rest now, he said, his voice slightly rough. You are safe here, Miss Hale. I give you my word. As he left the room, Madeline pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart beat fast against her palm. She had fled one prison only to find herself inexplicably drawn to her rescuer, a duke who looked at her as if she mattered, as if her suffering offended him personally. Outside her door, Maxwell leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The feel of her hand in his had ignited something he thought had died with Anna, a fierce protectiveness mixed with something more dangerous, desire. He pushed away from the wall and strode toward his study. There was work to be done, investigations to launch, protection to arrange. He would not examine too closely why Madeline Hale had burrowed under his carefully constructed defenses in less than a day. Some questions were safer left unasked. For now, the days that followed took on a rhythm Madeline had never known. Gentle, unhurried, suffused with a safety that felt almost dreamlike. Each morning, pale winter sunlight filtered through the blue room windows. Mrs. Fairchild would arrive with breakfast, helping her wash and dress in borrowed gowns that hung loose on her frame but smelled of lavender and careful storage. And each afternoon, as reliable as the clock chiming in the hallway, Maxwell would knock softly and ask if she felt well enough for company. She always said yes. At first, his visits were brief, polite inquiries about her comfort and recovery. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the visits lengthened. He began to sit in the chair by the window. Then he moved closer to the chair beside her bed, and they talked. Madeline learned that Maxwell had inherited the dukedom at 23 when his father died suddenly, that he had married Anna Pemberton 2 years later, a love match that scandalized no one because she had been perfect for him, kind, gentle, with a laugh that could light entire rooms. That she had died giving birth to a son who followed her within hours. That was 3 years ago, Maxwell said quietly, his gaze fixed on something beyond the window. Some days it feels like 3 lifetimes. Madeline reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing his wrist. I am sorry. Such inadequate words for such profound loss. He looked down at her hand, then slowly turned his own palm up, allowing her fingers to rest against his. The gesture felt monumental in its simplicity. The house became a mausoleum after that, he continued. I dismissed half the staff. I avoided London entirely. My mother writes regularly, begging me to rejoin society, but the thought of those ballrooms, All that false gaiety. He trailed off, shaking his head. You withdrew into grief, Madeline said softly, as if punishment could bring them back. Maxwell's eyes met hers, and she saw recognition there. Yes, exactly that. They sat in silence, hands loosely joined while the afternoon light shifted across the room. Finally, Maxwell cleared his throat and withdrew his hand, though reluctantly. Dr. Grant says you are healing well. Another week, and you should be able to walk the house freely. I would like that. I fear I'm becoming far too familiar with this room's wallpaper pattern. A smile ghosted across Maxwell's face, the first real one she had seen from him. It transformed his features, softening the stern lines around his mouth. What would you do first? If you could explore freely. Madeline did not hesitate. Your library. Mrs. Fairchild mentioned it has over 3,000 volumes. Maxwell's expression shifted to something like chagrin. It does, most of which have not been properly organized in years. After Anna died, I let everything fall into disarray. Books piled everywhere, no system, no order. An idea sparked in Madeline's mind, bright and hopeful. Perhaps I could help organize it, if you would permit me. I assisted my mother with her collection when I was young. There is something soothing about bringing order to chaos. Maxwell studied her for a long moment, his grey eyes searching hers. You wish to repair what is broken. In your library, yes. The words hung with unspoken meaning. But perhaps in myself as well. He leaned forward slightly, close enough that she could see the darker ring around his iris, smell the faint scent of sandalwood. Then, you shall have full access to the library, Miss Hale. Consider it your domain. Thank you, Your Grace. Maxwell. When we are alone, please call me Maxwell. The intimacy of the request stole her breath. Only if you call me Madeline. Madeline. He said her name slowly, as if tasting it. It suits you. The air between them felt charged, heavy with something neither dared name. Maxwell stood abruptly as though breaking a spell. I will have Mrs. Fairchild escort you to the library tomorrow. After he left, Madeline pressed her fingers to her lips, trying to calm the racing of her heart. What was happening between them felt dangerous and inevitable in equal measure. The next afternoon, wrapped in a thick shawl, Madeline made her way slowly down the grand staircase. Her ribs protested with each step, but she refused to turn back. The library took her breath away. It occupied the entire west wing, a vast room with floor-to-ceiling shelves, rolling ladders, and tall windows that flooded the space with light. But Maxwell had not exaggerated. Books lay in precarious stacks on every surface, volumes pulled from shelves and never returned, entire sections with no discernible order. It was glorious chaos. Mrs. Fairchild smiled warmly. His Grace anticipated your request, miss. There is a writing desk already prepared in the corner, with everything you might need. Madeline moved carefully through the room, running her fingers along leather spines, reading titles in Latin, Greek, English, and French. Poetry collections beside agricultural treatises, novels stacked atop philosophical texts. It would take months to properly organize. She could not wait to begin. When Maxwell found her an hour later, she was seated at the desk, carefully writing the first entries in a catalogue. She had removed her shawl in the warmth of the library, and colour had returned to her cheeks. He paused in the doorway, simply watching her. There was something about seeing her in his space, surrounded by his books, that felt profoundly right, as if she belonged here. You look happy, he said, announcing his presence. Madeline looked up, and her smile was radiant. I am. This is wonderful, Maxwell. Your collection is extraordinary. He crossed the room to stand beside her desk. Most of these books were my father's, and his father's before him. I have added little in recent years. Then we shall make sure they are preserved properly. She held up a volume of Byron. Where would you like this? With poetry or with British literature? Poetry, he said, then reconsidered. No, British literature. It will be easier to find. Madeline made a note. Your library, your rules. Maxwell pulled a chair close to hers and sat. Show me your system. She explained her method. Primary categories, then subcategories, then alphabetical by author. Her hands moved as she talked, animated and graceful, and Maxwell found himself watching her more than listening. A strand of dark hair had escaped her simple braid, curling against her neck. He wanted to reach out and tuck it behind her ear, wanted to trace the line of her jaw with his fingertips. "Maxwell?" He blinked, realizing she had asked him a question. "Forgive me, what did you say?" She studied him with knowing eyes, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I asked where you keep your poetry collections, the romantic poets." "There is a section near the east window," he managed. Or there was before everything became jumbled. "Shall we look together?" They rose and moved through the library side by side. Near the window they found Byron, Shelley, Keats, buried beneath books on crop rotation. As they worked to separate them, their hands kept brushing, reaching for the same volume, steadying a stack, passing books back and forth. Each touch lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. Madeline pulled down a slim volume of Keats and opened it, reading aloud softly. "Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art." Maxwell stepped closer, close enough that his shoulder nearly touched hers. "I know that one." A meditation on permanence and love. Madeline's voice dropped lower. "Pillowed upon my fair love's ripening breast, to feel forever its soft fall and swell, awake forever in a sweet unrest." She stopped, suddenly aware of how intimate the words sounded in this quiet room. With Maxwell so close, she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Still to hear her tender taken breath, Maxwell finished softly, his eyes on hers rather than the page. "And so live ever, or else swoon to death." Neither moved, neither breathed. The book trembled slightly in Madeline's hands. "Madeline," he whispered, "yes, I should not be this close to you." But he did not move away, neither did she. The library door opened with a sharp creak, and they sprang apart. Mrs. Fairchild entered, carrying a tea tray, her expression carefully neutral, though her eyes sparkled. "I thought you both might need refreshment," she said pleasantly. "Thank you, Mrs. Fairchild," Maxwell said, his voice only slightly unsteady. "Most thoughtful." As the housekeeper arranged the tea service, Maxwell caught Madeline's eye across the room. A silent promise passed between them. This was only beginning. Lady Constance Hargrave arrived at Norvale Hall on a crisp morning, her carriage rattling up the drive with the confidence of someone who had made the journey many times before. She was a handsome woman of 38, with shrewd eyes and a manner that suggested she suffered fools poorly but loved her friends fiercely. Maxwell met her in the drawing room, embracing her with genuine warmth. Constance had been Anna's dearest friend, and one of the few people whose company he still tolerated. "I hear you have taken in a mysterious guest," Constance said without preamble. "The countryside is positively buzzing with speculation." "The countryside should mind its own affairs," Maxwell replied, but there was no heat in his words. Constance studied him with keen eyes. "You look different, Max, less haunted." "Who is she?" "Her name is Madeline Hale. She was in danger and I offered sanctuary. I would like to meet her. If she is to remain here, even temporarily, she will need a friend. And frankly, you need a chaperone before the gossips turn this into a scandal." He found Madeline in the library, surrounded by stacks of books. She looked up as they entered, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Madeline, this is Lady Constance Hargrave, a dear family friend." "Constance, Miss Madeline Hale." Constance crossed the room and took Madeline's hands, her smile warm. "I am delighted to meet you, Miss Hale. Maxwell has told me very little, which means you must be quite important. He only becomes secretive about things that matter." Madeline blinked, clearly taken aback. "I am pleased to meet you as well, Lady Hargrave." "Constance, please. We shall be friends, you and I." Maxwell watched the two women with relief. Constance had a gift for putting people at ease. Over tea, Constance spoke of Anna with a gentleness that somehow made the memories less painful. She described their friendship, the joy Anna had brought to Norval, the way she had softened Maxwell's natural reserve. "She loved him desperately," Constance said, glancing at Maxwell, "and he loved her just as fiercely. When she died, a part of him died with her." Madeline's eyes found Maxwell's across the room. "But he did recover. He is here. He is kind. He saved me." Constance smiled. "Perhaps you saved each other." The moment hung suspended, weighted with truth none of them were ready to acknowledge aloud. A knock at the library door broke the spell. Mrs. Fairchild entered, her expression troubled. "Your Grace, Mr. Whitmore has arrived from London. He says it is urgent." Maxwell stood immediately. "Show him to my study. Ladies, please excuse me." After he left, Constance leaned toward Madeline. "Mr. Whitmore is Maxwell's solicitor. If he has come in person, the news must be significant." Madeline's hands twisted in her lap. "He has been investigating my brother, my inheritance." Constance squeezed her hand. "Then let us hope the news is good." In his study, Maxwell greeted Thomas Whitmore, a precise man with wire-rimmed spectacles. "Your Grace, I have completed the investigation. The findings are quite damning." Whitmore laid out papers, bank records, trust documents, correspondence. As he explained each piece, Maxwell's expression grew darker. "The trust established by the late Lady Hale remains entirely intact," Whitmore said. "Not a single penny has been touched. Viscount Ashcombe's claims were completely fabricated. Furthermore, he used this falsehood to assume guardianship and attempted to sell Miss Hale in marriage to Lord Pierce Crowle. The marriage contract shows a substantial payment, essentially purchasing Crowle's cooperation." Maxwell's hands curled into fists. "Can we prove fraud?" "Without question, Your Grace. I have affidavits from 3 bank officers and copies of the original trust documents. I want Edward Hale here. I want him to face what he has done." Whitmore nodded. "I can have a summons delivered within 2 days. Make it 1 day. And send word to Lord Hargrave. I want a witness of standing." 3 days later, Edward Hale arrived at Norvale Hall with the bluster of a man who believed his title protected him. He was handsome in a cold way, with fair hair and the same delicate bone structure as his half-sister, but his eyes held a cruelty that made Maxwell's skin crawl. Maxwell received him in his study with Lord Hargrave present, a tall man whose authority as magistrate was well known. "Your Grace," Edward said with false courtesy, "I received your rather peremptory summons. I confess I am confused." "You are confused," Maxwell interrupted, his voice deadly calm. "Allow me to clarify. You have committed fraud against your own sister, lied about her inheritance, physically abused her for years, and attempted to sell her to a man of notorious character." Edward's face paled, then flushed with anger. "My sister is a liar, whatever she has told you. She has told me very little. The evidence speaks for itself." He pushed documents across his desk. Edward's eyes widened as he recognized bank seals and legal stamps. "Where did you get those? From the institutions where you thought your lies were safe?" Lord Hargrave spoke, his voice carrying the weight of law. "Lord Ashcombe, I have reviewed these documents. The case for fraud is airtight. You have 2 choices. Sign a complete renunciation of guardianship over Miss Hale, acknowledge her full rights to her inheritance, and leave this county permanently, or face criminal prosecution." Edward's jaw worked silently. "You cannot do this. I am a viscount." Maxwell stood, his presence suddenly intimidating. "She is under my protection, and you are in my house making threats. Choose your next words carefully." The silence stretched taut. Finally, Edward's shoulders slumped. "Where do I sign?" Whitmore produced papers already prepared. Edward signed them with shaking hands, his face twisted with rage. "You will regret this," he spat. Lord Hargrave collected the signed documents. "You have 24 hours to vacate your residence in the county. If you are found here after that time, I will issue a warrant for your arrest." Edward turned and strode from the room, his footsteps echoing like the retreat of a beaten animal. When he was gone, Maxwell sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. "Thank you, both of you." Lord Hargrave smiled slightly. "Miss Hale is fortunate to have found such a champion." Maxwell found Madeline waiting in the library, her face anxious. Constance sat beside her, holding her hand. "It is done," Maxwell said quietly. "Edward has signed away all claims to you and your inheritance. You are free, Madeline." Her face crumpled. She tried to hold back tears, but they came anyway, great shuddering sobs. Maxwell crossed the room and gathered her into his arms without thinking. She clung to him, her face pressed against his chest, and he held her as tightly as he dared, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. He could feel her heart racing against his. the dampness of her tears soaking through his shirt. "You are safe now," he murmured into her hair. "No one will hurt you again. I promise." When she pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "Thank you. Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me." Maxwell cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the remaining tears. "Always," he said, the word heavy with meaning. "I will always fight for you." Their faces were inches apart. He could feel her breath on his lips, see the pulse fluttering at her throat. It would take so little to close the distance, to finally taste what he had been craving. But Constance cleared her throat delicately, reminding them they were not alone. Maxwell stepped back, though everything in him resisted. His hands lingered at Madeline's shoulders for one more moment before he forced himself to let go. As they moved toward the drawing room, Madeline caught Maxwell's hand briefly, squeezing it in silent gratitude and something more. Something that felt dangerously like promise. The morning after Edward's departure, Madeline woke to a sense of lightness she had not felt in years. She was free, truly free. The inheritance her mother had fought to protect was hers again, and the brother who had imprisoned her could no longer touch her. She dressed quickly and made her way to the library, eager to continue the cataloguing work that had become both purpose and refuge. But as she rounded the corner into the hallway, voices raised in anger stopped her. Maxwell's voice, cold and commanding, cut through the air. "You have no business here, Crowell. Leave my property immediately." A second voice answered, oily and insinuating. "I have every right to see my betrothed, Your Grace." A contract was signed. Money changed hands. Madeline's blood turned to ice. "Pierce Crowell, here." She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering as the voices grew closer. They were in the entrance hall. "There is no betrothed," Maxwell said, each word precise as a blade. "The contract was procured through fraud and coercion. It has no legal standing. Miss Hale is under my protection, and she wishes no contact with you." Crowell's laugh was ugly. "Your protection? Is that what we are calling it now? A young woman living unchaperoned in your house. I wonder what society would make of that arrangement." "Lady Constance Hargrave is in residence as chaperone," Maxwell replied. "Everything is entirely proper. Unlike your attempted purchase of an unwilling bride, I paid good money. You paid blood money to a criminal. Edward Hale had no right to sell what was not his. Now leave before I have you thrown out." Madeline forced herself to move, to step into the entrance hall. Both men turned to look at her. Maxwell's expression shifted immediately to concern. Crowell's eyes raked over her with a possessiveness that made her skin crawl. "Lord Crowell," she said, pleased that her voice did not shake, "I will never marry you. I would rather die." Crowell's face darkened. "You ungrateful girl. Do you know what I sacrificed?" "You sacrificed nothing," Madeline interrupted. "You purchased what you believed to be a helpless woman who could not refuse, but I am not helpless anymore." Maxwell moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. A wall of protection. "Miss Hale has made her position clear. I will not ask you again to leave." Crowell's eyes darted between them, calculating. "This is not over," he said finally. "You may have turned Edward out, Your Grace, but I have invested too much to walk away empty-handed." "Then you will lose your investment," Maxwell said flatly. "Mrs. Fairchild, show Lord Crowell to the door." The housekeeper appeared as if summoned, her expression glacial. "This way, my lord." After Crowell left, his carriage wheels crunching on the gravel drive, Maxwell turned to Madeline. His hands gripped her shoulders gently. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her legs felt unsteady. "I did not expect him to come here. Neither did I, but he will not return. I will make certain of it." "How?" Maxwell's jaw tightened. "I am sending a full dossier to the magistrate, documenting his attempted purchase of you and his history of debts and violence toward women. Lord Hargrave will ensure charges are filed. In the meantime, I am doubling the watch on the estate grounds." Madeline looked up at him, seeing the determination in his eyes. "You are doing so much for me. I do not know how to repay you." His hands slid from her shoulders down her arms, stopping at her wrists. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her pulse points. "I do not want repayment, Madeline. I want you safe. I want you to feel that this house is your sanctuary." "It is," she whispered. "Because you are here." The air between them charged with electricity. Maxwell's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "We should not—" But he did not finish the sentence. Neither of them moved apart. Constance's voice broke the moment. "Well, that was certainly dramatic. I watched the entire scene from the drawing room. You both handled that odious man admirably." Maxwell stepped back reluctantly. "Constance, we need to increase security. Crowell may attempt something desperate." "I agree." Constance's expression turned serious. "I will send word to my husband. He can spare some men to patrol the grounds. And Madeline, you should not go anywhere alone, not even to the village." That afternoon, Maxwell found Madeline in the conservatory, a glass-walled room filled with winter-blooming plants. She stood before a camellia bush, her fingers brushing the delicate pink petals. "I thought you might like this space," he said quietly. "Anna loved it here. She would spend hours tending these plants." Madeline turned to him with a soft smile. "It is beautiful, peaceful." He crossed to stand beside her. "I want you to consider it yours. A place where you can feel safe, where you can breathe." She reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Thank you, Maxwell, for everything. For the library, for this sanctuary, for standing between me and that monster." Maxwell's thumb stroked across her knuckles. "I told you I would protect you. I meant it. I know. But why? Why do all this for someone you barely know?" He turned to face her fully, his free hand rising to cup her cheek. "Because from the moment I found you in that forest, you have mattered to me in a way I cannot fully explain. Because seeing you hurt makes me want to tear down the world. Because when you smile, something in me that I thought was dead comes back to life." Madeline's breath caught. "Maxwell." He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. "Tell me to stop. Tell me this is madness." "It is madness," she whispered. "But I do not want you to stop." His lips brushed hers, feather-light. A question. She answered by rising on her toes, closing the distance, kissing him with all the longing that had been building between them for weeks. The kiss deepened slowly, sweetly. His hand slid into her hair, while hers gripped the front of his coat. They broke apart only to catch their breath, then came together again, more urgent this time. When they finally pulled back, both breathless, Maxwell rested his forehead against hers. "We should not be doing this without proper courtship." "Without what?" Madeline asked. "Without society's approval. Without waiting the appropriate amount of time. Maxwell, I have spent my entire life doing what others deemed proper, and it brought me nothing but pain." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "You are extraordinary. I am practical, and I know what I want." "What do you want?" "You," she said simply. "This. A life where I am not afraid, where I can choose my own path." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "Then you shall have it. All of it. But we must be careful. Crowell is still a threat." As if summoned by his name, Will Turner, the estate manager, appeared at the conservatory door. "Your Grace, we found tracks near the old mill. Someone has been watching the house." Maxwell's expression hardened instantly. "Double the night watch. No one enters or leaves the grounds without my knowledge." After Will left, Madeline shivered despite the conservatory's warmth. "He will not give up, will he?" Maxwell pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "No, but neither will I. Whatever comes, we face it together." She pressed her face against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in years, she believed in tomorrow. That evening, Maxwell had custom boots delivered to Madeline's room, soft leather lined with fur. Mrs. Fairchild presented them with a smile. His Grace ordered them from London. He said you should never have to walk painful paths again. Madeline held the boots, tears pricking her eyes. Such a simple gift, yet it spoke of care, of attention to details she thought no one noticed. When she wore them to dinner that night, Maxwell's eyes found hers across the table, and the warmth in his gaze said everything words could not. But outside, in the darkness beyond the estate's walls, shadows moved. Crowell had not finished with them yet. And the real test of their growing love was still to come. 3 days passed in a strange suspension between fear and joy. The estate remained under careful watch, but no further incidents occurred. Madeline and Maxwell fell into a rhythm that felt both dangerously intimate and achingly proper under Constance's watchful eye. They worked side by side in the library each afternoon. They took meals together. They sat in the drawing room after dinner, sometimes talking, sometimes reading in companionable silence. And they stole kisses when Constance discreetly turned away. On the fourth day, a light rain began to fall, soft and steady. Madeline stood at the library window, watching water streak down the glass. "You look restless," Maxwell said from his desk. She turned to find him watching her with that intensity that made her heart race. "I feel confined. I know it is necessary for safety, but these walls are beginning to close in." He rose and crossed to her. "The covered walks in the garden are sheltered. We could take a turn there, get some air. In the rain?" His smile was boyish. "Why not? We are hardly made of sugar." Minutes later, they walked the covered stone pathways that wound through Norvale's winter garden. The rain created a soft curtain around them, the air cool and fresh, smelling of earth and wet stone. Madeline had drawn her cloak close, but already felt freer than she had in days. Maxwell walked beside her, close enough that their arms brushed with each step. Neither wore gloves, and when his hand found hers, skin against skin, warmth flooded through her. They walked in silence for a while, listening to the rain, watching their breath mist in the cold air. Finally, Madeline spoke. "Why, Maxwell?" He looked at her, questioning. "Why risk so much for me? You could have sent me to London with money and references. You could have helped me from a distance. Instead, you opened your home, confronted my brother, made yourself a target for Crowell's anger. Why?" Maxwell stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His hand tightened on hers. "Do you truly not know? Tell me anyway." He was quiet for a long moment, rain drumming steadily on the roof above them. When he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "Because when I found you in that forest, something woke in me that I thought had died with Anna. Because every day you are here, this house feels less like a tomb and more like a home. Because I am terrified of losing you the way I lost her, but I am more terrified of never knowing what we could be together." He stepped closer, his free hand rising to cup her face. "Because I am falling in love with you, Madeline, and I cannot seem to stop myself, even though I know I should be more cautious, more proper, even though I know it is too soon." Madeline's heart hammered against her ribs. "It is not too soon. Not for me. You deserve time to heal, to discover who you are without fear. I know exactly who I am." Her voice was fierce now. "I am a woman who has survived hell and found heaven on the other side. I am someone who refuses to waste a single moment of happiness because society says I should wait. And I am absolutely certain that I love you too. Madeline," she pressed her fingers to his lips. "No more protests. No more should or should not. Just this. Just us." He pulled her hand away only to replace it with his mouth, kissing her with an urgency that stole her breath. She melted into him, her arms winding around his neck, his hands sliding to her waist and pulling her flush against him. The kiss was deeper than before, more desperate. His tongue traced her bottom lip, and she opened for him, tasting rain and desire and promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "We are getting soaked," he murmured, though neither moved to find better shelter. "I do not care." "Neither do I." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. His hands traced the curve of her spine through the heavy fabric of her cloak. She shivered, but not from cold. "Maxwell," she breathed against his mouth. "Yes, take me inside. Not to the drawing room where Constance will find us. Somewhere we can be alone." His eyes darkened with want and concern. "Madeline, if we are alone, I do not trust myself to remain a gentleman." "Good," she said boldly, "because I do not want a gentleman right now. I want you." He groaned, desire and restraint warring in his expression. "You will be the death of me, then we will die together." He kissed her once more hard and claiming, then took her hand and led her quickly through the rain toward a side entrance. They slipped inside, dripping water on the marble floors, and he guided her down a lesser-used corridor to a small sitting room rarely occupied. The moment the door closed behind them, he pulled her back into his arms. "Are you certain? We can stop." We should stop. Instead of answering, she reached up and removed the pins from her hair, letting it fall in damp waves around her shoulders. His eyes followed the movement, transfixed. I have never been more certain of anything. He made a sound somewhere between surrender and reverence, and then his mouth was on hers again. They moved blindly toward the settee, never breaking the kiss. His hands fumbled with the fastenings of her cloak, while hers worked at the buttons of his coat. When the heavy fabrics fell away, they were left in shirt and dress, still barriers, but fewer of them. Maxwell's lips traced a path from her mouth to her jaw, to the sensitive spot behind her ear. Madeline gasped, her fingers threading through his hair. "Tell me if I go too fast," he murmured against her neck. "Tell me if you want me to stop. Do not stop." His hands spanned her waist, thumbs brushing the underside of her ribcage. Even through the layers of her dress, the touch ignited fire under her skin. She tugged at his shirt, wanting to feel his warmth, his solidity. Slowly, deliberately, they explored each other with hands and lips, learning what made the other sigh, shiver, surrender. He kissed the hollow of her throat. She traced the strong line of his jaw. His fingers found the buttons at her back. Her palms mapped the muscles of his shoulders. The rain continued outside, creating a cocoon of sound around them, the rest of the world falling away until there was only this, breath and touch, and the overwhelming rightness of being together. When urgent knocking shattered the moment, they sprang apart, both flushed and breathing hard. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair, composing himself, before opening the door a crack. Will Turner stood there, his expression grim. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption. There has been movement near the East Gate. Multiple men. We believe it may be Crowell." Maxwell's entire demeanor shifted, protective instinct overriding everything else. "Lock down the house. No one in or out. I will be there immediately." He turned back to Madeline, whose face had gone pale. "Stay here with Constance. Do not leave the house under any circumstances. Maxwell, be careful." He crossed to her in 2 strides, kissing her fiercely. "I will come back to you. I promise." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with her racing heart and the certain knowledge that whatever was coming next would test them both. Outside, in the rain-soaked darkness, Crowell's patience had finally run out, and the reckoning was at hand. The threat proved less immediate than feared. The men Will spotted were poachers, not Crowell's hired thugs. But the incident left everyone on edge, a reminder that danger lurked just beyond the estate's walls. In the days that followed, Maxwell became more strategic. He met with Lord Hargrave to finalize the legal case against Crowell. He mapped escape routes from the house should they need them. He trained the staff on what to do in case of attack. And through it all, Madeline watched him with growing certainty. This was a man who would move heaven and earth to keep those he loved safe. The library project progressed steadily. Madeline had catalogued over 1,000 volumes, creating order from chaos, one book at a time. The work felt symbolic somehow, as if each shelf she organized represented a piece of herself being restored. Maxwell often joined her, though his help was questionable at best. He would pick up a book intending to shelve it, then become distracted reading passages aloud to her. She pretended to be annoyed, but secretly treasured every moment. One afternoon she found him holding a slim volume of poetry, his expression distant. "What is it?" she asked softly. He looked up, seeming to return from somewhere far away. This was Anna's favorite. She would read from it every evening before bed. Madeline moved closer, reading the spine. "Tennyson?" "Yes." He opened to a marked page. She loved this one especially. "Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." "Do you believe that?" Maxwell was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think it was a lie. That love only brought pain when it ended, but now. He set the book down and turned to face her fully. "Now I think perhaps Anna would want me to love again, to live again, not to forget her, but to honor her by not letting grief consume me forever." Madeline took his hands in hers. "She would want you to be happy. I am beginning to believe I could be, with you." She smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him gently. "Then let us choose that. Let us choose to love despite fear, despite propriety, despite everything that says we should wait or be cautious. You are remarkably brave." he murmured against her lips. "I am remarkably tired of being afraid." That evening, after dinner, Constance announced she had correspondence to attend to and would be occupied in her rooms for at least 2 hours. Her smile suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. "The sitting room has excellent acoustics," she said innocently. "Perfect for music. I believe the pianoforte was recently tuned." After she left, Maxwell extended his hand to Madeline. "Will you play for me? I am terribly out of practice. I do not care." The music room was smaller than the library, more intimate, with deep red walls and furniture upholstered in gold velvet. The pianoforte sat near tall windows that overlooked the darkening gardens. Madeline settled on the bench, her fingers finding the keys hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. She played a simple Mozart piece, one her mother had taught her years ago. Maxwell stood near the instrument, watching her hands move across the keys, watching the concentration on her face, the small smile that curved her lips as muscle memory took over. When she finished, the last notes hung in the air like a held breath. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. She looked up at him, and the intensity in his gaze made her pulse quicken. He moved closer, standing just behind the bench. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the sheet music. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He reached over her shoulder to turn the page, his chest nearly touching her back, his arm brushing hers. The proximity was electric. She could feel the heat of him, smell the sandalwood and leather scent that was uniquely his. His hand lingered on the edge of the music stand. Slowly, giving her every chance to move away, he let his fingers trail down to cover hers, where they rested on the keys. "Madeline," he whispered, his lips near her ear. She turned on the bench to face him, and suddenly they were so close their knees touched. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "I want to court you properly," he said, "with Constance as chaperone, with outings to the village, with all the respectability you deserve. But I also want this, these stolen moments where it is just us. We can have both, can we? Because every time I am alone with you, all I can think about is how much I want to kiss you, touch you, learn every inch of you." Heat flooded through her at his words. "Then do. We should be careful. Your reputation—" "I do not care about reputation. I care about you, about us." His control visibly frayed. He pulled her up from the bench and into his arms, kissing her with a hunger that had been building for days. She responded with equal fervor, her hands sliding up his chest to lock behind his neck. They stumbled slightly, catching themselves against the pianoforte. A discordant note rang out, making them both laugh breathlessly against each other's mouths. "We are terrible at being proper," he murmured. "Spectacularly terrible." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his tongue tracing the seam of her lips until she opened for him. His hands explored her back, her waist, the curve of her hip. She tugged at his cravat, loosening it, wanting to feel his skin. When his lips left hers to trail down her neck, she tilted her head back, giving him access. He found the spot where her pulse hammered and lavished attention there until she gasped his name. "Say it again," he demanded against her skin. "Maxwell." His hands tightened on her waist. "The way you say my name undoes me completely." She smiled, feeling powerful and desired in a way she never had before. Good. They kissed until they were both breathless, until propriety was a distant memory, until nothing existed except the two of them and this perfect, impossible moment. Finally, Maxwell pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. "We should stop before I forget myself entirely. What if I want you to forget yourself?" he groaned. "You are not making this easy. Nothing worth having is easy." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. True. Very true. They straightened their clothing, finger-combed their hair, tried to look like they had spent the evening in innocent musical appreciation rather than passionate embrace. Maxwell took both her hands in his. "Tomorrow, we go to the village. Publicly. Let everyone see that you are under my protection and my regard. Let us begin this courtship properly. And tonight, I will dream of you and count the hours until morning." As they left the music room, Madeline felt lighter than air. Whatever dangers lurked outside these walls, whatever trials awaited them, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had found the love she had been denied her entire life, and she would fight to keep it. Behind them, the pianoforte sat silent in the darkening room, a witness to the promises made and the passion barely restrained. Tomorrow they would face the world together, but tonight, love had won. The planned trip to the village never happened. A storm rolled in during the night, heavy rain that turned roads to rivers and made travel impossible. By midday, Norvale Hall was an island unto itself, cut off from the outside world by walls of water. Madeline stood at the library window, watching rain sheet down the glass. Behind her she could hear Maxwell discussing household matters with Mrs. Fairchild. The housekeeper's voice carried a knowing quality as she spoke. "Lady Constance has taken to her rooms with a headache, Your Grace. She asked not to be disturbed until dinner at the earliest. I shall ensure the staff remains occupied in the East Wing. Thank you, Mrs. Fairchild." The housekeeper's footsteps retreated, and then Maxwell was beside Madeline, his reflection joining hers in the rain-streaked window. "It seems we find ourselves with a rare afternoon of privacy," he said quietly. She turned to face him, seeing the question in his eyes, the same question that had been building between them for days. "What do you want, Madeline?" She reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "You, all of you. No more waiting. Are you certain? Once we cross this line..." "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." He pulled her close, kissing her with all the tenderness and hunger he had been restraining. When he drew back, his eyes were dark with desire. "The library," he murmured. "No one will disturb us there." They moved through the house like conspirators, hand in hand, hearts racing. The library welcomed them with its familiar scent of leather and paper, its warmth from the low-burning fire. Maxwell locked the door, then pulled the heavy curtains closed, creating a sanctuary within a sanctuary. He turned to her and for a moment simply looked, as if memorizing every detail. The stormlight filtering through gaps in the curtains painted her in shades of silver and shadow. "You are so beautiful," he said, "and I am terrified of hurting you." She crossed to him, taking his hands and placing them at her waist. "You could never hurt me, not like this." He kissed her slowly, reverently, his hands beginning a careful exploration. She responded in kind, her fingers working at the buttons of his waistcoat. Each piece of clothing removed was a question asked and answered. Each touch was a promise spoken without words. "May I?" he whispered against her lips, his fingers at the fastenings of her dress. "Yes." The fabric parted under his skilled hands. He traced the newly exposed skin of her shoulders with his fingertips, then followed the same path with his lips. She shivered, not from cold but from the exquisite sensation of being cherished. Her dress pooled at her feet, leaving her in undergarments that suddenly felt like too many layers. He stepped back, his breath catching as he looked at her. "Tell me what you want," he said, voice rough with restraint. "I want to feel your skin against mine." He removed his coat and waistcoat, then his shirt, revealing the strong planes of his chest and shoulders. She reached out, palms flat against his warmth, feeling his heart pound beneath her touch. They came together again, kiss by kiss, touch by touch. He guided her to the sofa near the fireplace, settling her gently among the cushions. His hands trembled slightly as he loosened her corset, and she covered them with her own. "I am not fragile," she assured him. "I will not break. I know. But I have waited so long to have you like this. I want to savor every moment." Then savor. He did. His lips mapped every inch of skin revealed as clothing fell away. The curve of her shoulder, the dip of her collarbone, the soft swell of her breasts. Each kiss was worship, each touch reverence. She explored him in return, learning the landscape of his body, the ridge of muscle across his shoulders, the scattered scars from years of riding and living, the way he shuddered when she traced the line of his spine. When he asked permission again, his eyes searching hers, she guided his hand to where she wanted him, showing him without words that she was ready. "I love you," he whispered against her mouth. "I love you too. Show me." They came together with exquisite slowness, his body joining hers in an ancient dance. He moved with careful restraint, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. But there was only pleasure, only the overwhelming rightness of being complete. She arched into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, his name a prayer on her lips. He buried his face in her neck, breathing her in, moving with a rhythm that built slowly from tender to urgent. The world outside disappeared. The storm, the threats, the painful past, all of it fell away until there was only this, their bodies moving together, their breath mingling, their hearts beating in synchrony. When release came, it swept through them both like lightning, bright and all-consuming. They clung to each other through the aftershocks, murmuring words of love and wonder. Afterward, he gathered blankets from the sofa and wrapped them both in a cocoon of warmth. She lay against his chest, his fingers threading lazily through her hair, her hand resting over his heart. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She tilted her head to look at him, seeing concern and tenderness in equal measure. "I am perfect." That was perfect. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I was terrified I would hurt you. You did not. You made me feel cherished, desired, loved. You are all those things." He shifted to look down at her, his expression serious now. "I want to marry you, Madeline, properly, with vows and witnesses and all the world knowing you are mine." "Yes," she breathed, "yes to all of it." They lay together in the firelight, skin to skin, hearts entwined, making quiet plans for a future that had seemed impossible mere weeks ago. Outside the storm raged on, but inside their sanctuary peace reigned. Maxwell traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "There will be no night when you fear tomorrow," he promised. "No morning when you wake alone. No moment when you doubt that you are loved." She pressed a kiss to his chest right above his heart. "And you will never again live in shadow, never again believe you are meant for loneliness." They sealed these promises with kisses, with touches that rekindled desire into gentle flame. They made love again, slower this time, learning each other's rhythms, discovering what made the other sigh and surrender. When urgent knocking finally shattered their peace, they dressed hastily, helping each other with buttons and laces, stealing kisses between adjustments. Maxwell opened the door to find Will Turner, his face grave. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption. There has been movement near the East Gate, multiple riders. We believe Crowell is making his move." Maxwell's expression hardened instantly, the lover transforming into the protector. He turned to Madeline, cupping her face in his hands. "Stay in the house, stay safe." She gripped his wrists. "Come back to me." "Always," he promised, kissing her fiercely one last time. Then he was gone, striding toward danger with the certainty of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. And Madeline was left in the library, surrounded by the evidence of their passion, knowing that the true test of their love was only beginning. The riders at the East Gate turned out to be Lord Hargrave and his men, arriving with news. Crowell had been spotted in the village, drunk and making threats. Maxwell doubled the guard and returned to find Madeline safe, though shaken. But Crowell was more cunning than they anticipated. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm's fury spent. Against Maxwell's better judgment, but at Constance's insistence, they agreed Madeline could accompany them on a brief ride to inspect storm damage on the estate, provided they took an armed escort. What none of them knew was that Crowell had been watching, waiting for exactly this opportunity. The attack came swiftly. One moment they were riding along the forest road, the next, men emerged from the trees like phantoms. The escort fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. Madeline saw misses. Fairchild, who had insisted on accompanying them, struck down as she tried to shield her. The housekeeper crumpled with a cry of pain, blood blooming on her sleeve. Constance screamed. The horses reared in panic, and then rough hands were pulling Madeline from her saddle, a cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. She fought, kicking and clawing, but the world tilted and darkened. The last thing she heard was Maxwell roaring her name. She woke to find herself in a decrepit mill, the kind abandoned years ago when newer machinery made it obsolete. Ropes bound her wrists and ankles. Her head pounded, and when she tried to move, pain lanced through her shoulders. Well, well. The runaway bride awakens. Lord Pierce Crowell stepped from the shadows, and even in her dazed state, Madeline could see he had deteriorated. His clothes were disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking with either drink or desperation. "You cannot do this," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "The Duke will come for me. Lord Hargrave knows you are behind this." Crowell laughed, the sound unhinged. "Do you think I care? I have lost everything because of you. My creditors are circling. My reputation is in tatters. The only way out is to marry you and claim your fortune, or failing that, to make the Duke pay handsomely for your return. He will never negotiate with you. Then perhaps I will simply take you to Gretna Green and force the marriage myself. Scottish law is wonderfully accommodating." Fear spiked through her, but she refused to show it. "You are a fool if you think this will end any way but badly for you." His hand cracked across her face, snapping her head to the side. She tasted blood. "You will learn respect," he snarled, "one way or another." But before he could strike again, shouts erupted outside. The sound of horses, many of them, men calling orders. Crowell's face went pale. He grabbed Madeline roughly, hauling her upright despite her bound feet. A knife appeared in his hand, pressing against her ribs. "Tell them to back away," he hissed, "or I will gut you here and now." The mill door crashed open. Maxwell stood framed in the doorway, and the fury on his face was terrifying. Behind him, Madeline could see Lord Hargrave, Will Turner, and at least a dozen men. "Let her go, Crowell," Maxwell said, his voice deadly calm. "There is nowhere for you to run." "I have a knife at her ribs," Crowell spat back. "One wrong move and she dies." Maxwell's eyes found Madeline's, and she saw fear there, yes, but also absolute determination. He took a step forward, hands raised. "You do not want to do this. Killing her gains you nothing. But if you surrender now, you will live to see trial." "Trial?" Crowell laughed wildly. "I will hang regardless. At least this way I take something from you first." His arm tightened, the blade pressing harder. Madeline gasped in pain, and Maxwell's control visibly frayed. In that moment of distraction, Will Turner moved with surprising speed for a man his size. He tackled Crowell from the side, and the knife went skittering across the floor. Maxwell surged forward, catching Madeline as she fell, his arms wrapping around her protectively. Behind them, Lord Hargrave and his men subdued Crowell, who fought like a cornered animal until they forced him to the ground and bound him. Maxwell's hands shook as he untied Madeline's bonds, his face ashen. When her hands were free, she threw her arms around his neck, and he held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I thought I lost you," he said against her hair, his voice breaking. "When they took you, I thought. But you found me. You always find me." He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs gentle on her bruised cheek. "Did he hurt you?" "Nothing that will not heal." His jaw clenched. "He will pay for every mark on you. I swear it." Lord Hargrave approached, his expression grim. "We have him, Your Grace. The evidence is overwhelming. Kidnapping, assault, attempted extortion. He will hang for this." "Good," Maxwell said flatly. They carried Madeline out of the mill to find Constance waiting with a carriage, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Fairchild sat beside her, her arm bandaged, but her eyes alert. "Miss Hale," the housekeeper said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank God. Mrs. Fairchild, you are injured because of me." "Nonsense. I have weathered worse than a knife scratch." "Are you all right, child?" Madeline nodded, though exhaustion was rapidly overwhelming her adrenaline. Maxwell lifted her into the carriage as if she weighed nothing, then climbed in beside her, pulling her against his chest. The ride back to Norvale Hall passed in a blur. Maxwell held her the entire way, one hand stroking her hair, the other gripping hers as if afraid she might disappear. When they arrived, Dr. Grant was already there, summoned by a rider who had gone ahead. He examined Madeline thoroughly, pronouncing her bruised but fundamentally unharmed. The sleeping draught they had used would wear off completely within hours. "She needs rest," the doctor told Maxwell, "and time to recover from the shock." "She will have both," Maxwell assured him, "and anything else she requires." After the doctor left, Maxwell sat on the edge of Madeline's bed, still holding her hand. His control finally cracked, and she saw moisture gleam in his eyes. "When I saw him with that knife against you, when I thought I might watch you die." He stopped, unable to continue. Madeline reached up and pulled him down beside her, wrapping herself around him. "But I am here. I am safe. We are both safe," He buried his face in her neck, his arms crushing her close. "I cannot lose you. I cannot survive that again. You will not lose me," she promised. "We have fought too hard for this. For us." They lay together until his breathing steadied, until the trembling in his hands eased. Outside, Lord Hargrave's men were taking Crowell away in chains. The threat was ended, but the fear would take longer to fade. "Marry me," Maxwell said suddenly, fiercely. "Tomorrow. Today, as soon as possible. I want you bound to me in every way that matters." Madeline smiled against his chest. "Yes, yes to all of it." He lifted her face to his and kissed her with desperate tenderness. "You are mine," he whispered, "and I am yours. Nothing will ever change that." "Nothing," she agreed. And in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they both believed it absolutely. The worst was behind them. Only joy remained ahead. 3 weeks later, Lord Pierce Crowell stood trial at the county assizes. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Testimony from Maxwell, Constance, Mrs. Fairchild, and the men who had participated in the kidnapping, and later turned witness. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to transportation to Australia for 20 years, with forfeiture of his title and estates. As he was led away in chains, Crowell looked back once at Madeline seated between Maxwell and Constance. She met his gaze steadily, no longer afraid. "You have no power over me," she said quietly. "You never did." News arrived that same week that Edward Hale had fled to America, his creditors finally catching up with him. The Ashcombe estate, mortgaged beyond recovery, was being sold to satisfy his debts. The title would pass to a distant cousin. Madeline felt no satisfaction in her half-brother's downfall, only a quiet relief that he could hurt no one else. The trust her mother had established was fully restored to her control. The sum was substantial, enough to live independently for the rest of her life if she chose. But she had other plans. The wedding took place on a crisp morning in early spring, in the small chapel on the Norvale estate. It was an intimate affair, nothing like the grand society weddings Maxwell could have commanded. Just Constance and Lord Hargrave as witnesses, Dr. Grant, Mrs. Fairchild, and the household staff, and a handful of tenant families who had known Maxwell all his life. Madeline wore a simple gown of cream silk with orange blossoms in her hair. Maxwell stood waiting for her at the altar in dark blue superfine, and when she walked down the aisle, his eyes shone with tears he made no effort to hide. The vicar spoke the ancient words, and they repeated their vows with voices that trembled with emotion. "I, Maxwell Edward Everley, take thee, Madeline Rose Hale. I, Madeline Rose Hale, take thee, Maxwell Edward Everley, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Maxwell kissed her with such tender passion that Constance dabbed at her eyes, and even stoic Mrs. Fairchild sniffled. The wedding breakfast was held in Norvale's dining room, filled with laughter and toasts and the warmth of genuine affection. Maxwell never let go of Madeline's hand, as if still unable to believe she was truly his. Later, as the guests departed and the house settled into evening quiet, they stood together in the conservatory where they had first kissed. The camellias were in full bloom now, pink and white blossoms covering the bushes. "Happy?" Maxwell asked, pulling her close. Madeline leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent. "More than I ever imagined possible." He kissed the top of her head. "I have something to show you." He led her to his study, where documents lay spread across the desk. She recognized the letterhead of her mother's trust. "I have been thinking about what we discussed," he said, "about using your inheritance to help others." She looked up at him, curious. "The old Thornwick Mill where Crowell held you. Lord Hargrave has agreed to sell it to us for a nominal sum. With renovations, it could become something beautiful, something purposeful." Understanding dawned. "A refuge?" "Yes, for women fleeing situations like yours. A place where they can heal, learn skills, regain their independence. Dr. Grant has agreed to provide medical care. I thought we might call it Thornwick House." Madeline's throat tightened with emotion. "You want to transform the place of my worst fear into a beacon of hope." Sometimes the best way to defeat darkness is to fill it with light. She kissed him fiercely. Yes, 1,000 times yes, we will build it together. Over the following months, they threw themselves into the project. The mill was gutted and rebuilt, transformed from a prison into a sanctuary. They hired staff, a matron, teachers, a cook. Dr. Grant visited twice weekly. Word spread quietly through the county. Women began arriving, some with children, all with stories of abuse and desperation. Thornwick House welcomed them without judgment, offered them safety without conditions. Madeline worked alongside them, teaching literacy and numbers, listening to their stories, seeing herself reflected in their eyes. Maxwell managed the finances and legal protections, ensuring every woman who left Thornwick House did so with skills, references, and the means to support herself. It was exhausting, heartbreaking, and profoundly fulfilling work. On a warm evening in late summer, Madeline found Maxwell in the library at Norvale, surrounded by account books for Thornwick House. She came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "We helped 12 women find employment this month," she said. "3 have already written to say they are thriving." He turned in his chair, pulling her onto his lap. "Because of you, because you refused to let your pain be meaningless." "Because of us," she corrected. "I could not do this without you." He kissed her softly, his hand coming to rest on her stomach where a small curve was just beginning to show. "And what of our own family? How are you feeling?" "Perfectly well. Dr. Grant says everything is progressing beautifully." Maxwell's hand spread protectively over where their child grew. A child born into love and safety, everything we never had and everything we will give. Madeline covered his hand with hers. "Do you think about Anna? About the child you lost?" "Every day," he said honestly, "but not with the same crushing grief. Now I remember them with gratitude for the time we had and hope for the future we are building. She would be proud of you." "I hope so." He stood, lifting Madeline with him. "Come, I want to show you something." He led her out to the garden, where twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. They walked hand in hand to the small family cemetery, where Anna and their son rested beneath a marble stone. Maxwell knelt and placed fresh flowers on the grave. "Thank you," he said softly, "for teaching me how to love, for making room in your heart for her to love too." Madeline knelt beside him, her hand finding his. "Always." They sat in the fading light, honoring the past while embracing the future. When Madeline shivered in the cooling air, Maxwell drew her close. "Shall we go in?" he asked. "Not yet." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Feel." He waited, patient, and then his eyes widened as he felt the flutter of movement. "The baby?" "Our baby." Wonder transformed his face. He pulled her close, kissing her temple, her cheek, her lips. "Thank you," he whispered, "for choosing life, for choosing us, for being brave enough to love again." "We were both brave," she said. "We both chose to heal." They walked back to the house together, silhouettes against the dying light. Inside, lamps were being lit, dinner was being prepared, and life in all its beautiful complexity waited for them. Madeline paused at the threshold, looking back at the forest where Maxwell had found her that frozen night. She had been broken then, barely alive, running from a nightmare. Now she was whole, loved, free. And more than that, she was building a legacy of hope for others who still ran through dark forests, searching for the light. Maxwell squeezed her hand. "Ready?" She smiled up at him, this duke who had saved her and been saved in turn. "Always." They stepped inside together, closing the door on the past and opening their arms to all the tomorrows yet to come. The end. Sometimes the darkest forests lead us to the brightest dawns. Madeline fled through frozen woods, broken and afraid, never imagining that the man who found her would become her salvation and her great love. Maxwell believed his heart had died with his first wife, until a stranger in the snow reminded him that healing is not betrayal and second chances are not second best. Their love was not easy. It was built on trust earned through action, passion tempered with tenderness, and the courage to believe that broken people can become whole again when they choose each other, every single day. What would you do if love found you in your darkest hour? Would you have the courage to reach for it? If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to help others find it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of love, redemption, and second chances. And comment below telling me where in the world you are listening from. Your support means everything and helps these stories reach those who need them most. Thank you for sharing this journey with me.